Welcome, everybody, to a very special Boxscore Geeks show. It was one of Patrick Minton's dreams to be on the Short Corner podcast. Right after he started his ill-gotten campaign to do that, the show was canceled. So we've tried to do the best we could, which is to bring the show to us. We've had Paul Shirley as a guest, and today we are so lucky to have Justin Halpern as a guest. Justin, thank you for being on. Give a shout-out so people who haven't heard your voice can hear it for the first time.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm excited to talk NBA for the first time since I was canceled for Snooki.
All right, I'm going to do quick intros first, and then we're going to just launch right into talking with Justin. So I'm Andres Alvarez, a.k.a. Nerd Numbers. All the dogs love me. Patrick, I love on the show that it's your dog now that makes the noise because it used to be mine.
I'll be right back.
All right. That was Patrick Minton and his dog, Whiskey. You can find Patrick as at NBA Geek. I think Patrick, I don't know. Not possible. That's really weird. Patrick could mute himself, but he walked away from the computer. All right. Our producer is Brian Foster. I want to say this is... Justin, this is for those of you watching. The show also started late, and it. So Justin, thanks. You're seeing it at our worst. So
I love it.
By the way, Patrick, in future, if you ever want to mute yourself,
I think I got a new fuck that guy.
You can.
Could you believe this is like some random I don't know, CenturyLink? They want to do a survey, so you ring a door at a random house and there's this dog barking at you, like. Fucking go away. They just stand there for like 5 minutes until I finally open up the door and let my dog at them. And then they're like, oh, let's get out of here. I'm like, well, you could have fucking thought of that earlier.
All right. Brian, want to say hey real quick? Brian Foster, Boxscore. Brian, by the way, Patrick, Skype does have a mute option if your dog keeps barking until it calms down. And then whatever.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I knew that. I should click that. I thought I did when I left. Sorry.
All right. Brian.
Auspicious start.
I got nothing to say, Dre.
Yeah, well,
let's keep the show rolling.
All right, so Justin, you did something I didn't think was possible, although given your resume, you guys, hopefully you can take some gentle ribbing about this, but given your resume, I guess it was to be expected, but you got a podcast canceled, which I didn't think was possible.
I didn't know it was possible either. I thought as long as you had a microphone and internet, you could have a podcast. But we did. We were at Podcast One, and we were doing what we thought was okay numbers-wise. And then one day they just told us, hey, you're canceled. And I said the same thing. I was like, is that a thing? Can you cancel a podcast? And guess what? It is a thing. You can cancel a podcast when you're on somebody's network.
And you and Paul joked, but I mean, between you two, Paul's been cut, said a lot of times, like the Hawks, who are, now in the playoffs, they've had a couple stories where Paul talked about having a 10-day contract in hand and then them yanking it at the last second. You've had several, prominent shows cut at this point. So I guess it was to be expected, but that was hilarious.
This follow-up podcast probably ran longer than anything either one of us ever did.
Oh, that's rough. And what I was going to say is when Steve Nash retired, I kind of went nuts on the internet because you and Paul had an interview with Steve Nash that actually had an advertisement for Daily Fantasy Sports. So highly pertinent advertisement, great interview, highly topical. Podcast One pulled all of your material off the net, which to me is meaningless. I mean, we host a podcast. I pay, I'll put this in quotes, a premium to host it on Libsyn, which I think is $5 to $20 a month, something like that. So it was remarkable to me that not only did they cancel you, they pulled all the material, which had to have been costing them pennies, and it was with relevant stuff that could have actually gotten them traffic.
Yeah, if you know Paul at all, you know that Paul is not afraid to light fire to a bridge. And so when we got canceled, Paul wrote an email, which I thought for Paul was mild, but Podcast One, I think, didn't appreciate it. So they took down our archives, which was a bummer because we had some good interviews on there. We did an interview with Nash where I thought it was one of the better interviews with him. And we didn't, we had Harabalos on, and it was a good show.
I love those interviews, even though Bob Voulgaris, I have such a love. I don't even hate. He's a funny one because we'll argue back and forth on times on Twitter. we're going to talk DeAndre Jordan later. And I posted this on a Friday night thinking it wasn't going to get any traffic. And then Bob retweeted it and it got the most traffic we'd seen on like a Saturday. But I like that guy. But he actually on your podcast dissed Dave Barry a few times, which I enjoyed.
He did, yeah. We've had Dave on a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, I can't remember if that's how I found it, but, it was, we heard your show, and on our podcast, we kind of started making a running gag where we could have literally just, like, we'd start a few shows, and Patrick and I would just start talking about how great the stuff you had talked about in last week's show. I'm like, we might as well just make our own podcast that's just, like, recapping how great the Short Corner podcast was this week.
Well, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'm glad you liked it so much. We enjoyed doing it. We might make a little comeback at some point, but
yeah. Well, I mean, you want to say anything more about the Short Corner, the experience on podcast one? I think one last note I'll throw to you, and I'll see your thoughts here is, I think it's a little unfair because they have a lot of professional wrestlers as their shows. And I feel it's kind of a cheat code because professional wrestling, Brian and I have been meaning to do a show on WrestleMania, has been kind of floundering in a lot of the former greats. People still like wrestling and want to hear like good talkers. They have all these professional wrestlers hosting, but the actual industry sucks. So it'd kind of be like if the NBA was sucking, but like LeBron James and Kevin Durant were playing one-on-one somewhere. I think it's unfair to put what the Short Corner podcast was trying to do in that same market because they basically were leeching off the talent off an industry that was floundering but still had billions of dollars in it.
Oh yeah, dude, those wrestler podcasts got crazy numbers. They would tell us like Stone Cold was making I think millions of dollars a year on that podcast.
Well, I mean, it's completely believable given that like I said, the real product is hurting. And I'd actually be curious. Let's move in a little. Because I think Patrick had some questions. You're doing some show running or tried, and you that was part of the issue with the Short Corner at the end is you weren't around as much because you were actually out doing your real craft, which is
gotta make those dollars. Gotta make those dollars.
Well, how did that turn out for you? And Patrick, if you want to ask questions back and forth, I know I've been hogging the mic here for Justin, but I'd be curious to hear what you've been doing since Short Corner went the way of the dodo.
Yeah, I mean, so towards the end of Short Corner, I'm on contract at Warner Brothers, and so every year I kind of go out with pilots and try to sell them for Warner Brothers, and then write them. And we had a good year, and we sold a couple pilots. And so when that happened, I'm just like round the clock busy, super duper busy, and I kept. Every week I'd be like, "Hey Paul, I think I'll be able to make it," and then the last minute I wouldn't be able to make it because we'd have to, rewrite something. Or when you get notes from a network, they're paying you, they're paying for the show just to make the show. They pay several $1 million to make the show, the production costs. They don't want to hear like, "Yeah, I can't do your notes because I got to do my NBA podcast." So it ended up kind of going away, and I was, I just couldn't make it. And then finally, I think when we got the cancellation, we were talking about, oh, should we still do this on our own? And Paul was like, you don't have any time to do this. And Paul was busy too. And I think it just ended up being kind of like where it was leading anyway.
And so do you want to talk about, so I think you said, did either of your pilots get picked up or neither?
No, they did not. The first pilot I did for ABC, and it was one of those things. Well, we did two. So one was for ABC, and it was based off of this astronaut. You know that guy who sang Space Oddity in Space, did the YouTube video?
Yeah.
Right. So Chris Hadfield. So we did a pilot based on his book, and it was a multi-camera pilot. And because ABC had all these single camera pilots that were doing so well, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and they didn't want to do another multicam. So that one didn't go. And then for CBS, we made it all the way in to the end. We shot it. It was based on this comedian who's very funny named Tommy Johnigan, who you should check out his comedy if you like stand-up. Great comedian. We did the pilot, and CBS did not pick up one single multi-camera pilot. They only picked up two singles. So sometimes as in development, you are also victim to whatever the trends of that season are. So we did not get either pilot picked up, but most pilots don't get picked up. So I've been very fortunate in my career to have a couple shows on the air, even though they got canceled. And it was just one of those things where I mean, it's definitely a blow to the ego when people are like, "Yeah, we want you to stop doing this."
So I've got two quick stories. The first, you saw one of these, was I decided to binge watch Community. I haven't caught the recent season, but I was binge watching it, and they made a shit my dad says like
Oh yeah.
illusion joke. And I thought it was hilarious. Now I realized when I saw it, it was like 3 or 4 years old by the time I had seen it. But I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I tweeted it to you, and I was like, yes, and I'm well aware that I am being outdated on my reference, but it's still awesome you got that. So that's the pinnacle. If you're referenced on Community, in my opinion, you've made a career for yourself. The other funny one is I was hanging out with some friends, and I made fun of one of my friends. He said something stupid. And I was like, I'm going to make a website about you called like Stupid Stuff Lannon Says While Walking with Friends. And someone was like, you could be like that one guy who did like the dad one. And I was like, he follows me on Twitter. Now, this should be the blow to the ego first. They said, who's the most famous person that follows you on Twitter? Which that should, hurt your ego. They didn't think you were enough. And I said, Mark Cuban. And they went, who? And so they knew you over Mark Cuban. So that's the hit you should take.
Cuban.
What?
I said, eat shit, Mark Cuban.
I don't know why he still likes us. We have a love-hate. We praise him one week, bash him the next. But those are my Justin Halpern stories about that stuff. Let's actually talk some hoops.
Yay, basketball.
Yeah, we were doing this pre-show, and you and Patrick, and actually Brian too, I'm the only one in this audience that hasn't hurt my shoulder really bad, so I can't relate. You were talking about Kevin Love. So we'll get to the Clippers in a second. I actually wanted to talk the Cavs, particularly because your producer on the short-lived Short Corner pod actually was a huge Cavs fan, and I would love to be ribbing them because they might make the finals, but they don't deserve to.
No, I think the Cavs, I mean, even with Kevin Love, I feel like that team was like one of those teams like in the NCAA tournament who they get hot for 3 games and then they have one collapse because they're so dependent on basically just getting hot. I mean, if you look at like LeBron obviously is one of those guys who can carry a bunch of corpses to the finals. But I think in the case of this Cavs team, and especially with Kyrie, I feel like it's one of those things where if Kyrie is not shooting well or if he's not playing well, it almost doesn't matter how well LeBron's playing just solely because of the amount of time Kyrie needs to have the ball in his hands. And so for this Cavs team, I think Love created a little more space, even though he was not the player that they thought they were getting. He created space on the floor so that even when Kyrie was, having a rough night, he could still dish. And now I think if you watch those Cleveland games, well, I mean, what offense are they running? Like, what are they running?
It's like Kyrie and LeBron they trade off. They take turns running the whole, like, I'll just take the ball in the middle of the floor and create something offense.
Yeah, they remind me of 2011, or I guess no, the first year LeBron was in Miami, the first like 25 games, it was like, all right, Wade, your turn. Now, LeBron, it's your turn. And that's what their offense looks like right now.
It's horrible. It's awful to watch.
Well, one question I've got there, because you just said Love wasn't the player they thought they were getting. I really like, I'm going to keep coming back to Short Corner Podcast. We got you. But like you and Paul had an interesting perspective. And so like you've done a lot of TV. And I think something you mentioned on a show is like anybody in the industry kind of realizes that even if you've had a failure, quote unquote, it's not really on you because there's so many moving pieces. And I feel Love wasn't the player they were expecting because they didn't use him the way that you should use Love. We've talked.
Yeah, they didn't do any of the things with him that he's good at. Like they hired a player who's good at like 4 things, and they asked him to do like 2 of those things, and then a bunch of other random shit he's not good at. It's like, well, no wonder he's not the player you asked for.
Well, it happens all the time in TV. In TV, you're putting together a cast, right? And you have 5 people in the cast, and you have a finite amount of time that show runs 22 minutes. So what we always hear as TV producers is we'll always hear like for instance on Surviving Jack, rest in peace. We had, a really good cast in Rachel Harris, who played Christopher Maloney's wife, is a very talented actress. And the criticism at the very start of the show was, well, she's wasted in the show. Well, the problem is you have a star of the show, and that person has to have the lion's share of the lines, and then you have to fulfill their storyline. And a basketball team is so Rachel gets short shrift. So a basketball team is no different. Kevin Love was the apex predator. He's the star of the show in Minnesota, and you can't come to a place where there's LeBron and Kyrie and expect to just plug him in and have him operate the same way. It just anybody who thought that it was going to be the same way. Look at what Chris Bosh did in Miami.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
on the other hand, though, I get that his role should be more limited, maybe, but even in that limited role, I don't feel like they used the things that he's good at. Like, how many times did you see Kevin Love catch the ball on the elbow in Cleveland? Like, it almost never happens, and yet that was a pretty classic. That was pretty much the only offensive set in Minnesota that ever worked. Was let's throw the ball into Kevin Love on the elbow, and let's have Kevin Martin and Corey Brewer doing some flex actions on the wings, and let's have whoever the other shooting guard who's left over do some dribble handoff action. That was like the only set that ever worked consistently to produce buckets in Minnesota, and I haven't seen it once in Cleveland, even though he would have fantastic targets. The thing about it is like, I know LeBron James is great with the ball, but LeBron James could be awesome off the ball if he would ever fucking agree to play off the ball. And yet he doesn't seem to want to do that in Cleveland, right? He wants to be on the ball.
But look at the guys who do play off the ball. Like the guys who play off the ball are just by their nature not attackers. The guys who are best off the ball is like JJ Redick. You know, watch on the Clippers like JJ Redick. Like remember like Rip Hamilton. These guys who are just running their defender ragged and they're making cuts and they're passing and cutting and they're doing all those things. Yep. And it's that to be that kind of player, you've had to like practice being that kind of player your whole life. So then to ask LeBron James to say, hey, this offense is going to run through Kevin Love at the elbow and you're going to be cutting and he's going to be kicking.
Yeah.
He's just not going to do it.
Well, I'm not saying it has to be that way every time, but they never try it. Right? I mean, why not do it? Why not have it just be one of the many looks you throw at your opponent? That's Cleveland's problem. It's that they don't throw lots of looks at the opponent. They throw the same 2 looks. Sorry, it's 4 looks. It's LeBron from the left top of the key, or Kyrie from the left top of the key, or LeBron from the right top of the key, and Kyrie from the right top of the key. Those are the 4 looks they throw at opponents, and it's terrible.
Here's why. Right? This is what I think, and this is where Paul and I had many disagreements on the short corner, is David Blatt, and now, I mean, it's pretty obvious, David Blatt doesn't have control of the team, right? He doesn't have full control. When he was hired, imagine if they had signed LeBron first before they'd hired a coach. Do you think he would have been the coach he picked? Yeah. I don't think so. So now you have a situation where David Blatt is hired first, then they get LeBron, and suddenly it's no longer David Blatt's team. So even if David Blatt is, I don't think you can tell whether he's good or not good because he ultimately can't run that team. So if you have, say what you want about Phil Jackson and the offense he ran and whether that's something you could run now, you have a player, you have a coach, when he walks in the locker room, it's his team. And I think with David Blatt, there's no way to institute any sort of offense other than, hey, LeBron, do you kind of want to do this? Can I sort of shove you in this direction? That's the best you can do.
Yeah, but that says a lot about LeBron's coachability to me. I mean,
But he's never been coachable.
What's that?
He's never been coachable. That's the thing. He has this image of being this like.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Spoelstra was essentially a rookie. He was as close to a rookie coach as you can get when LeBron went there, right?
Yeah.
And he seems to have.
Do you remember that first year?
Well, it was all right. It wasn't nearly as bad as with David Blatt.
That first year started to excel when Chris Bosh understood who he had to be in that offense. It wasn't LeBron making a change. It wasn't D. Wade making a change. Both those guys were pretty stubborn that first year. It was Chris Bosh deciding this is how I'll play to unite this whole team.
That's an interesting
thing. It's kind of rough too, because like as the numbers guys, this is one of those things that comes in is like Chris Bosh's numbers took a dive while he was on Miami. And it's like rough to what you're saying because it's like part of Chris Bosh's game that made him so great is he was a really great shooter at the hoop. If you like, he's got the most perfect shot chart if you look at him in Toronto. He's basically like bright red at the rim, really light until he gets far out. So he's perfect shooter. He gets to Miami and he starts turning into a mid-range jumper. And that means that he basically said, probably next to LeBron, I'm the best person at the rim on this team, but I'll give up the rim to you and Wade. I'll just give it up. You guys can have it, but my numbers are going to look
Yeah, and
worse.
I think that is a different comparison too, because I mean, the thing is, ideally, Kevin Love should be able to just step in and rock it right away because Kevin Love is very good in post up situations. He's good at the elbow and he's good from three. He's not really he doesn't really occupy those spaces that Kyrie and LeBron need, which is mostly like penetrating to the rim. When they penetrate to the rim, LeBron can step out and create space, which he already does pretty well. Um, it it seemed like he's a better fit offensively than Bosch was right from the get go because I mean it's not like he was creating his own 3-point shot in Minnesota either, right? I mean, somebody was passing to him in Minnesota too. So that's just kind of a part of the game where you slot right in. I'm just going to stand here. I know how to get open when people penetrate, and then you'll pass me the ball, and then I'll shoot a 3-pointer. That's not really rocket science. That's not really a thing that he needed to like learn how to do again. Whereas I don't know. Bosch had what, like maybe a couple dozen 3-pointers in his whole career before he went to Miami. And he was basically a guy who lived only at the rim, which obviously totally gets in the way of both Dwayne Wade and LeBron James because Wade doesn't really shoot outside at all, and the power of LeBron James' game has always been his ability to get to the rim and convert at an extremely high rate there. But I don't think Kevin Love sort of got in the way of Irving and LeBron's game. I think he should have been able to fit in better and be more effective than he was.
No, but he's also a guy who needs the ball in his hands. If you watch Kevin Love in post-ups, he doesn't operate really quickly. He does the same thing Blake does, where he needs a few dribbles. Like, if you look at LaMarcus Aldridge gets the ball, and he usually reacts. He's shooting a long two, which is not a great shot, but
Yeah.
he's making a decision as soon as he gets the ball. Kevin Love and Blake, neither one of those two guys do it. The Clippers offense is set up for Blake to take a little bit of time. The Cavs offense is not set up for Kevin Love to have the ball in his hands for 4 seconds.
I think that was true before the 2013-14 season, but the way Rick Adelman was using him in that last season, that totally changed. He was basically a very quick decision maker and facilitator. His assists went from like almost nothing to like 4 per game in that year, and that's because they just changed the way they were using him. They weren't like using him in the low post all the time. He got a couple of low post ups every game, but mostly it was like get the ball at the elbow, people move, make a quick decision, boom, you're done. And he doesn't need the ball in his hands a lot like the way Blake does or the way that a point guard or he doesn't need to like dribble around with the ball. He's not a create your shot type of guy that way. But
I'd like to see what happens if the Cavs next year with the Cavs, if he stays.
He's not staying. I'd take the money. He's not staying.
But that's the thing. Here's the decision. Like, you're currently injured. If you opt out, are you going to get a max contract for 5 years?
Someone would be dumb enough.
You think so?
Yes.
Because not that many teams have cap room, and a lot of them are going to wait because they want to compete in the the 16-17 market that's going to explode, right?
So by the way, we lingered on
Or
the
15,
Cavs,
16,
which
sorry.
I have no complaints, which is hilarious because I was thinking we were going to talk injury. We didn't. I don't care. That was awesome, the back and forth. But Justin, here's something that just I had so much lament for. You and Paul, and bless you, I loved it every week. You bashed the Raptors every week, and you basically bashed DeRozan. You were like, this is not a good, like, Paul, if we were a better run show, we'd have clips of Paul saying, the Raptors just are not a good team. And I was so sad to see them flame out in the playoffs and not have a vindication, you and Paul bashing them. So here's your, I mean, that's about as good as I can pigeonhole in. Here's your vindication. What do you got to say about the Raptors this playoffs? Did you even watch them?
I did watch them, and first of all, if you're a coach and you let Randy Whitman pants you as a coach, first of all, Dwayne Casey is not. It was like a failure on so many levels. Like at least during the season, I thought, all right, well, Dwayne Casey has them playing hard. Like I think those guys play hard. I think they really care, and he lost them in that series. They looked so defeated. Aside from the fact that I thought the offense looked fucking terrible. I thought Kyle Lowry realized like way too early on, I'm going to have to do everything. He just went into, which I want to talk about Steph Curry in a little bit, but
yes,
he went into what Steph's doing right now, which is just trying to like, he's playing angry basketball. Like I always say this about Russell Westbrook and guys like that is sometimes Russell Westbrook plays basketball like basketball tried to fuck his wife. That's like he's playing like he's mad at the game, and I think that's just it takes you out of your game. And so I mean the Raptors kind of dissolved in every single way they could have dissolved, but all of those places that they did dissolve, I think during the season you could see where, oh, if this happens, this is going to completely fall apart. I think the Raptors have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I strongly suspect that there's going to be a lot of movement there.
All right. And yeah, I don't have clever segues, but we had, I had a very ambitious script here. I'm having to cut a bunch. We got to talk the Clippers. There's absolutely no way we can't talk the Clippers. I'm actually going to throw something forward because, damn it, as awesome as your show was, this was one spot, and this is one of the few places of contention with myself and Bob Voulgaris too. I want to stress anybody that thinks I have beef with Voulgaris on the net. I probably hate you. I hate you as a stats person that doesn't know what you're talking about. Voulgaris, I have minor things that I disagree with, and for the most part, when you ask either of us, we're like, whatever. Okay, I love DeAndre Jordan. I wrote an article this year that said I thought he was MVP material. Everybody, including Patrick, gave me shit about this. It's the most
no, wait. My shit was only because there was like Anthony Davis and everyone else. That was my shit.
Anyway, but that's the most crap I've ever had for a positive article. I get tons of crap for yelling at Kobe Bryant, but that's because Kobe Bryant fans. After you exit the show, I'm going to talk a little Kobe today too, Justin. But DeAndre Jordan, as a Clippers fan, do you still Haka Jordan just failed miserably? He put up like a 20-something and 14. He's averaging like 14 rebounds a game, and that's with Blake Griffin rebounding. Can you give him any respect? Can you give him any love?
I mean, Paul is the one who would always shit on DeAndre. I love DeAndre. I've missed probably 10 minutes of the Clippers season this year. I've watched every single game, and this is one of those things where, you guys can actually probably argue this, but as just somebody who's watched the games, when he comes out of the game, if you're talking about MVP in a sense of what they mean specifically to that team and not best player, when DJ comes out of those games for the Clippers for any extended period of time, I mean, you saw it at the end of that Spurs game where the Spurs got all those offensive rebounds and the Clippers almost lost the game. Like, the whole court changes for the Clippers. Their defense is completely anchored by him. And here's the other thing, is that on defense, and you can't really see this when you're watching the game, but when you're there and you're close, you can hear it. DJ is giving assignments during the play to everyone on defense. Every single one on defense, including Chris Paul, listens to what DeAndre Jordan is saying during defensive sets. You can hear it. I hear it from my seats every single time. Nobody talks about it. He's constantly yelling out coverages, switches, who's doing what. And I've watched him for, all his whole career, and to go from a player who was like basically lost on the court when he first started playing, like didn't look like he knew how to play basketball at all.
Yeah.
The type of basketball he plays now is so smart, and my only gripe on him on defense is I think his one-on-one post defense is not great. But other than that, I think Draymond and Kawhi are actually better defenders, but just barely.
Well, I mean, you even putting him in that category, because I've got no complaints. Like, when Kawhi won Defensive Player of the Year, I went, he probably deserves it, but are you kidding me on Draymond Green? Like, I think everybody, like, watching that's like Marissa Tomei winning the Oscars, and everybody, like, looked at each other and was like, did they grab the wrong envelope? And then he said his name so wrong, too, that I think he just, like, grabbed the wrong envelope, couldn't pronounce it, and just like made a name up or something. Because I can't. I love him, but missing that many games and winning Defensive Player of the Year seemed
he barely cracked 2,000 minutes, which is, I mean, it's nuts for somebody.
But you put DeAndre that high is remarkable to me. And sorry, Patrick, didn't mean to cut you off.
He means so much to that defense, and offensively, he obviously there's not a play run for him the entire year. But I will say this is, he opens up the floor for Chris because they're terrified of. You would see it. Chris would drive the lane, and people would back up into DeAndre to stop a lob, and it opens up that little fucking elbow 12-footer for Chris Paul, which is his game. And if you don't, when DeAndre's not, watch the game when DeAndre's not in and Chris is there, and see how often Chris can still get that 12-footer. It's not as often because guys come out.
It was exactly the same when he played with Tyson Chandler before Chandler's big injury in New Orleans. Like every game, it was like Chris Paul was just he would get 12 footers constantly because the defense was terrified of watching Chris Paul lob it to Tyson Chandler and have it go in. It's just, I mean, I say it over and over again. When you're a big, knowing how to use that open space to run to the rim at the right time, that is a skill. That's not just random luck. Like, if it were that easy, all of the 7 feet tall players in the NBA would be doing it. Like, just the fact that he only gets 5 or 6 dunks a game doesn't mean that's easy. And people always cut short. Like, we talk about offensive skill, they cut short that ability to play off the ball and to run to the rim. It's like there are lots of really tall guys who could catch a lob pass and dunk the ball. It's not that easy to time it right, to be there exactly when you need to be there based on when your teammates are penetrating. It's a really incredibly rare skill, and there's really only like 4 or 5 guys in the NBA that are as good as him. It's like Tyson Chandler, Brandon Wright, DeAndre Jordan, and a couple of other big guys are the only ones that are really, really good at that.
I
All right.
completely agree.
All right, and Justin, this one. So Patrick doesn't like this comparison, but because I like, just repeating stuff. Patrick made this comparison on the show. He doesn't cop to it, and I agree with him. The basic comparison we made was Blake Griffin was like Vince Carter if you just looked at like their age curves, where they both started really hot, were amazing dunkers, and they both had this like stall in the third or fourth year of their career. Now, Blake Griffin's, though, I think I was arguing last show, was likely injury. And if we're watching him in the playoffs, this performance, by the way, is like Larry Birdish. Like, I can't believe that it's possible that the Clippers may win a title and that I don't think Chris Paul is the favorite to get finals MVP. I think if they make it to the finals and win, I think Griffin's taking the finals MVP. You actually get to watch, like, what do you think about Blake Griffin's recent performance? Like you were even saying, like his passing, like that team, his passing is remarkable and he does everything else. And he had this like lull, but he's come back. What are your is this Blake Griffin that we're seeing in the playoffs for real?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I mean, he's always been, even when he was sort of just raw, he always had good hands and good eyes for in terms of passing. The passing, I wish like more people talked about like the way he picks apart the defense when he gets the ball at the free throw line or he gets the ball and in those situations where he's got to make a split second pass. It's pretty remarkable the vision that he has as a big guy. And I always think like, if you watch a lot of basketball, you'll see like, point guard passing sets up your offense. But I think what really demoralizes and kills a defense is when your interior bigs can pass. And, I read some crazy stat and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was saying like the lob combination of, guy who throws it to guy who catches it, like Blake to DeAndre was like number 4 in the league, which name me another fucking power forward who is throwing as many lobs as Blake Griffin is. I mean, it's amazing. And I think, the whole season, everybody was like, Blake's lost a step. Blake's not playing as explosive. Is Blake injured? Last year, when they were in the playoffs and they were in that series against OKC, you could see how beaten down all of their bodies were. Blake's body, Chris especially. And you could see all their quotes after each game would be like, I just got to get right. I'm not feeling right. And I knew leaving that series, we went to the game where they were eliminated against OKC, and I turned to my wife as I was leaving and I said, I bet you anything those guys take it much easier during the regular season next year because they want to be as healthy as they can going into this playoffs. It must kill them to know that their body can't do what they needed to do because they killed themselves in the regular season. And sure enough, Blake's firing off, basically bad shots, 20-footers all year, right? Low percentage shots. But they still had a great record, and he made it through the entire year without getting himself in a position where he was going to be hobbled in the playoffs.
And damned if it's not paying off. I mean, I saw that. Like I said, I did a query. I wrote an article about this on Blake Griffin's first season, and basically it was like him, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain, and Tracy McGrady are the only bigs that managed to like shoot that much, pass that much, rebound that well in the playoffs for at least 7 games. And I mean, I think he's keeping that up through because he had that triple double in the last 2 games. He's been mediocre passing at only 3 and 4 a game while scoring like over 20 points on amazingly effective shooting.
Yeah. But didn't he only play essentially 3/4 in both of those games?
I hoped it was obvious that was coming across as sarcastic. His performance
I see what you're
remained
saying.
remarkable.
I get it now. I'm
saying
slow
like,
to catch up.
He only got 4 assists for a power forward that also scored like 24 points on like 10 for 16 or something.
Here's the thing, too, is, Chris Paul goes down as the hero in that opening series against the Spurs, but it was Blake Griffin who won that series. They had no answer for Blake Griffin.
Oh, yeah, no. Who thinks Paul was better than Griffin? Griffin was amazing in that series.
He was the only.
He was like a triple-double machine.
Yeah, he was the only matchup problem that Popovich could not solve.
Yeah, I mean, was it game 1 where like Griffin basically posterized 4 different Spurs at 4 different times, including Aaron Baines twice? I mean, I think he was amazing in that series.
This leaves out a couple years, including probably some Larry Bird ones which did qualify. But on Basketball Reference for the modern NBA, Blake Griffin is the only player with, like, I think it's 1984, 1985 on, to have back-to-back 20, 10, and 10 with points, assists, rebounds in the playoffs for a big ever. Like in the
I'm actually really surprised Barkley never did it in '93.
Yeah, I could give you that.
Yeah.
All right, so Justin, I definitely want to get to fuck that guy because we'd be remiss without that. But is there anything else you want to say about the playoffs? Oh, you said Steph Curry. So what did you want to say about Steph Curry?
Oh, well, Steph Curry's my fuck that guy.
Oh, okay. So do you want to just go straight to fuck that guy?
Spoiler alert.
Well, I just wanted to say one other thing before we get to the fuck that guy. And it's specifically about the Eastern Conference semis that are going on right now. Is, people are talking about like, oh my God, it's amazing the resiliency of the Wizards. John Wall's out and they're still playing hard, and this Cavs Bulls series. You cannot watch those Eastern Conference series and think that any of those teams are that good. There's no way. They're not good teams. I thought the Bulls, the whole year I was like, you know what, if Rose gets semi-right, the Bulls are a really good team that can contend. I don't think any Eastern Conference team could take the Spurs to 7 for sure. And I don't think any of them could take the Warriors to 6.
And what about your Clippers? Where do you rank them there? Because, by the way, the Clippers on the end of the season standings, if we look at point differential and strength of schedule, they're basically like just above the Spurs and a little below the Warriors.
Same thing. I think the Clippers, I don't think any team could take the Clippers to 7. I still think the Warriors are going to win the whole thing, but I don't think any team in the East could take the Clippers to 7.
Oh, definitely agreed.
So this will be one of those years where it kind of feels like that year where Philadelphia went to the finals, and then I think they got trounced by was it the Lakers that year? I think it was the Lakers. Yeah. And it feels like the whole Eastern Conference, you're just like watching these losers knock each other out for the right to just get completely trounced by the Western Conference in the finals.
Yeah. That's what
and it smacks a lot, by the way, of like the Nets year. Because if you look back, the Nets made back-to-back finals, and they didn't get 55 wins. It was basically Jason Kidd. Like, you could almost view him as like a LeBron analog. This one superstar player willing this team in the playoffs to go up, against the West, where like the Spurs were just like, if the Spurs and Lakers were like, no. All right, so actually, I'm going to cheat on. So Paul, you spoiled your fuck that guy, but I'm actually going to give Patrick. If you know the one, I'm throwing you a lob here, Patrick, because you sent one out in the email. I thought it was brilliant. It has a lot to do with the Eastern Conference.
Oh, yeah.
You got a brilliant fuck that guy that you have to take. If you don't, I'm going to feel sad.
Yeah, okay. So my fuck that guy is actually going to be a double team fuck that guy. I got 2 people, but it's for the same reason, so it counts. It's okay. My fuck that guy is to Derrick Rose and Paul Pierce, because both of them hit like incredible game winners to win their to win game 3 of their respective series, right? And it's like, well, both of them were these crazy shots where it took a lot of talent to get that shot off and make that game winner, and all the credit to them. But both of them, after the shot went in, they're both like celebrating. They're like, yeah, like the Derrick Rose's celebration where he's just all like, and then the Paul Pearson, like that vine where he's talking about how he's the truth, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, but you fucking missed the shot. I mean, yeah, I know the shot went in, it went off the glass, but You fucking missed. Like, if you missed the shot, you should not be celebrating like, oh yeah, I'm badass. We're badass. We're going to the finals. Yeah, we rock it. That's the truth. You should be like Michael Jordan in 93 after he hit like that 7th three-pointer in a row where you're just like, sorry, I guess I'm awesome. Sorry about that. That would be a cool like celebration. But to be like, oh yeah, I totally called bank on that motherfucker after you hit the hit the winning shot is I'm sorry, that just reeks of like
Actually,
poserism
I do
right
gotta
there.
give Paul Pierce that was really clever banter where they said, "Did you call bank?" and he said, "I called game." That was I gotta give that to him. That was pretty good.
I'm sorry, that still qualifies as a fuck that guy. Fuck those guys.
All
Well,
right,
I
and
will
I
say-
realized. Oh, go
And
ahead.
you know, fuck that guy can be both bad and good. So let's just put it in this category, right? Because I mean,
I
hitting a
feel-
game-winning shot in the NBA playoffs is awesome, but posing about it afterwards as if you called bank when you just got lucky is not awesome. So you get kind of a mixed fuck that guy from me. Just see this mixed fuck that guy.
And I realized I forgot to actually do a proper intro. I apologize for this. But Fuck That Guy is a segment from the Short Corner podcast where basically you're the creator, Justin. You were kind enough to let us have it, so to speak, and we really appreciate that. You know, it's kind of like grabbing a player off an ABA roster after the ABA went under. But anyway, basically it's, you know, you say fuck that guy to somebody, usually a sports person, either possibly for being horrible or even for being really good. And that's what Patrick, you've done the blend of both. So we've already spoiled yours, but I want to hear your justification, Justin.
So here is my fuck that guy. Here's why Steph Curry is my fuck that guy. Going into the series with the Grizzlies, you had to know that the Grizzlies were going to play physical. That they were going, and from game one, every chance they got, they would bump Steph, they'd push Steph. Steph would get hit a little harder when he went into the lane on timeouts. They'd walk past him and they'd hit him. They were just basically bullying him. It was not even really basketball anymore. It was just, I'm going to physically let this guy know that I don't respect him in any way, right? And it's what Chris Paul did to Steph last year in the first round. And because it happened last year in the first round where Chris Paul was essentially just bullying Steph Curry every chance he got, I thought this year Steph was going to know, all right, this is what's going to happen. And either someone on my team is going to step up for me and make a statement physically, or I'm just not going to let it bother me. I'm just going to play my game. And he is so taken out of the game when people get physical with him that it disappoints me as a basketball fan because he's such a fun player to watch. And his reaction to being bullied is he either tries so hard to make them look stupid on defense when he's on offense that he forces not good shots, or he basically plays he basically has the reaction of a kid in school who's being bullied, which is to kind of withdraw and decide, you know what, I don't want to take part in this. And I can't believe that somebody like Draymond Green, who essentially is supposed to be the heart of the team and the physical sort of enforcer on the team, that no one has said, you know what, we're not going to let people do this to Steph Curry. Because it used to happen to Blake when Chris Paul first came to the Lakers to the Clippers. This is what people were doing to Blake. They were just hammering him every time he came down the lane. And then Matt Barnes basically decided, all right, I'm going to accept some fines and I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen as much. And Blake doesn't allow it to happen as much. And even now when it happens, he doesn't let it affect him. And so it's disappointing for me to see Steph Curry, who's such a fun player to watch, to see him taken out of his game because of non-basketball plays.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because if I were Steve Kerr, the guy I'd be telling them to pull the enforcer move on would be Tony Allen. I'd be sending Klay Thompson around all kinds of screens, and I would be telling all the screeners, try and get as much elbow, knee, shoulder action as you possibly can into every goddamn pick you set for Tony Allen. Like, I'd just be basically saying sweep the leg about Tony Allen, right? Like, just, I mean, make that guy suffer, like,
Here's the biggest problem.
Because Tony Allen beats up on Klay Thompson a lot, and it's fair physical, but it's really physical, right?
And here's the thing: is that I think Steve Kerr is a good coach, and I think he can be a great coach at times. I think he's good, but that team 100% has Steve Kerr's personality. And Steve Kerr's personality is finesse and movement and not mixing it up. And
But
so,
this is the same guy who in a practice like walked over to Michael Jordan and punched him in the jaw to like stand up to the bully.
but
That was like
that whole story, the lead up to that story is he'd been tortured by Jordan endlessly. It was like it took basically Jordan ruining his entire life for him to stand up for himself. And so that's the thing. Are the Warriors going to get to that point in this series where they say, you know what, it's enough. I'm not going to let you do this anymore to our star player, or are they just going to let themselves be bullied out of the building?
I
yeah, it's
hope not,
weird.
because this, by the way, another, like, as we are the stats crowd or whatever, this is the best team in the history of the NBA, and every other team except for the 72 Bucks that did like proportionally as well went on to win the finals. The Bucks didn't because they lost to the 72 Lakers, who were in the same bin of like elite teams. So like, I feel kind of bad for the Warriors because they've got, you know, if you're talking advanced stats, like this is the team that like no team has not won the finals performing this well. And with how bad the East is, if the Warriors don't win the finals, it will be a disappointment. And I usually hate that.
Yeah.
I usually hate that criticism. I'm usually so staunchly against it. But when the Clippers and the Spurs are arguably two of the best teams in the history of the NBA, if you look at their point differential, if the Warriors are blowing that away and they don't win a finals, that'll be
Yeah,
bad.
what's interesting is this is kind of like a window of opportunity year for the West because the conference alignments could change next year. A couple superstars could change hands next year. There could be all kinds of reasons the East might be better or the general road to the playoffs might be harder next year. And so if you're a West team, it's like all I gotta do is make it to the finals and then I'm good. So it's a really big opportunity for all four teams that are still here.
I
Like,
still think that the Warriors are going to win the championship because I think of what Dre, of what you were saying is people kept talking about how good the West was all year. And then they were just like, they'd kind of add on at the end of that. And the Warriors are, number one in the West and having a great season. It's like, no. The Warriors had one of the best seasons ever in one of the best conferences ever.
yeah.
They're a historically good team. And I just think that I think if they play the Clippers, they're going to beat the Clippers in 6 because I think they play a similar style of game as the Clippers, and the Clippers just don't play that style as well. And I think if they play anybody other than the Bulls in the East, I think they'll sweep in 4 games.
I also think right now that the Clippers. Sorry, I'm echoing a little bit. The Clippers are doing a good job right now because they have sort of an injured Chris Paul, but the Rockets really don't have a point guard who can totally abuse him. They can totally take advantage of the fact that he's hobbled a little bit right now. Whereas for obvious reasons, the Warriors have, they have 2 players that can totally take advantage of it if Chris Paul is injured and can't really play defense the way he, traditionally has throughout the year.
Let me ask you guys a question before I go. This is a question for you guys as numbers guys. How do you feel about Daryl Morey?
I'm
meh.
Well, so here's the thing. The issue I have, and I feel there's 2 parts. So I'm going to ramble on for a bit. First is I feel the NBA is a lot like television, and I that's why I really liked your perspective, because I feel there's a lot of stuff out of your control that goes on behind the scenes that you can't know about, like, star players not getting along. So you've constructed this great team, but the stars don't get along, so you got to trade one, or the owner says you're not allowed to spend money or whatever. So in that regard, I think it's harder to judge GMs. But I think in the last couple of years as a numbers guy, I've kind of just become very disheartened with the idea of like the Moneyball revolution, because even the best teams, even the most savvy, and I would count Houston as one of those teams, still doesn't seem to fully have it. And I think Daryl Morey is a much better GM than I think 90% of the GMs in the NBA. And I think he's done a really good job. But like, it's kind of like when your kid gets a C on a test, but they get an A because of the curve. And they're like, I got an A. And you look at it and you're like, yeah, but you missed some easy questions. You only got an A because your class is kind of dumb.
Let me use an analogy that I have for Daryl Morey, which is, the first guy to start using the forward pass in football revolutionized the game of football, but he wasn't necessarily the best passer. So other people took his methods and became great passers and became much better than him. And I think Daryl Morey gets a lot of credit because he was sort of the guy who was pioneering this way of GMing. But I just think that there are a lot of people doing it better than he is now. And finally, the biggest thing I want to say about him is how fucking smart can you be if you stand by Kevin McHale as your coach?
Well,
Yeah,
I think he's saying by standing by him that he doesn't think the coach matters very much.
Which he's totally wrong.
That is an opinion that is perfectly willing to to debate, but I'm just saying I don't think he stands by Kevin McHale because he thinks Kevin McHale is like a genius coach. I don't think that's what's happening.
But you're the Houston Rockets. You can get the best coach available. Why not get a better coach?
What I think is interesting, and I don't know why this doesn't happen more, he's so willing to experiment in the D League. Why doesn't he experiment with a coach? Why not give some guy nobody's ever heard of, but who has like really interesting, weird new ideas? Why not give him a chance? Like for example, the guy who runs the D League team that has the most absurd 3-and layup offense ever. Like, why not give him a chance or something like that? And I understand there's problems with, okay, you got to get Dwight Howard to listen to you and stuff like that. At the same time, I mean, they're listening to Kevin McHale. So.
But Paul always talks about, and I think it's so smart because it's the exact same way in show running in TV shows, is when the showrunner or the coach walks into the room, you need to know that they're in charge. Like, they have to walk in with some sort of command where everybody immediately says, oh, well, that's the guy who's making the calls. And I think when those people come in who just don't have it. And if you watch, there was my friend was talking to me about this yesterday. He said on TV in the Rockets Clips game, McHale calls a timeout, and first of all, 4 guys come over, not even all 5 starters. They come over, and McHale's drawing up a play and saying something, and they leave before he's done. And at that point, that can't be your head coach. It just can't.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
Okay, so by the way, Justin, anything you want to hype about yourself? So you are Justin_Halpern on Twitter.
I am.
I think we're just about out of time. By the way, my fuck that guy was going to be David Blatt for comparing himself to a fighter pilot as an NBA coach. He said a basketball coach makes 150 to 200 critical decisions during the course of a game, something I think is paralleled only, he said the word only, by a fighter pilot. So only NBA coaches and fighter pilots understand what it's like to coach the Cavs, I guess. So fuck that.
That's
anyway.
a really good fuck that guy. Wait,
Right,
wait. We can't leave without the real fuck that guy that I think everyone, well, at least Justin wasn't maybe that privy to his emails. But
sorry, I apologize. You do have to.
It doesn't have to be me, but we have to. Can we get a collective fuck that guy for James Dolan, please? Because
absolutely.
I'm sorry, I specifically said we're not going to talk about feminism on this show with 4 dudes, but come on, you got a guy who was convicted and told by a jury of his peers to pay $11.7 million in damages for sexual harassment. So, by the way, Mr. Dolan, it's not alleged anymore if a jury fucking convicts you. That's not how it works. It's not alleged anymore. It actually happened if the jury convicts you. So, and then he hires the guy, which is bad enough to give a guy like that a job, but he gives him the job running the women's team. It's does he not have any lawyers that are just oh, dude, this is a really bad idea. Don't
By the
do
way,
this.
if you go to YouTube, it's still got to be out there. Isaiah Thomas is someone who, in an interview, legitimately, it's just one of those train wreck interviews, said, well, I think it's okay to call women the B word based on your ethnicity. And they were like, no, you don't mean that, right? They're like, this is kind of like the Sean Connery when he said it was okay to hit women. And they were like, you don't mean that, right? Here's your out. You really don't mean that, right? And he kept going. He kept digging. And Isaiah was like, no, I meant it. And you're like, no, you didn't mean it. He's like, no, I meant it. So this is the guy in charge of their WM.
James Dolan is constantly creating the first act to a movie. It's like a guy who's a misogynist takes over the WNBA team, but except the second and third acts where he learns to be a better person just never come.
I mean, to me, this is okay, Phil Jackson won't let me do anything with the men's club, so fuck all these people. I'm going to hire Isaiah Thomas to run the women's team just to show that I can.
All right. And so we did go into overtime there, Justin. Justin _ Halpern on Twitter. Anything else you want to promote? Thank you so much for being on. Yeah.
Nope.
Mike is yours for anything else you want to plug.
Not really anything other than, if you want to find drunken basketball tweets by me and Paul Shirley, you can still find at Short Corner Pod. We still tweet from there during the playoffs. And thanks for having me on the show, guys. And now I'm going to cook dinner so my wife doesn't leave me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks so much. And floor is always open. Whenever you want to come on, I'll kick myself off the show if you need an open spot. So there you go.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Yeah, you as well.
Bye.
And you want to, I don't want to go too much longer, Patrick, but I had a few random notes actually from last week's show where it got weird. It's actually hilarious that you say you don't want to talk feminism, but yeah, that was amazing. I'm glad we got him on the show. That was,
yeah. To be honest, like you and I think we're both, is there like that word from male feminist? I don't know if it's cool to use that or not. And
I call myself a feminist.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think you and I are pretty active as far as men go on Twitter about these kinds of things. But I feel like I could have a lot to say about the Avengers or something if this weren't a sports themed podcast.
And by the way, one thing I'm going to say for that is the off season, like that's like Brian,
let's do like an all geek episode that has nothing to do with basketball in the off season.
Yeah, exactly. Like Brian and I, like I said, WrestleMania. It's like I keep thinking, I'm like, why don't we talk this? It's like we've got this long drought where as soon as the draft is over, we're going to be hurting. And there's only so many times we're going to be able to say, wow, it's really amazing. Kevin Love stuck with the Cavs. Are they going to do better next year? Like after 2 weeks, that's going to run dry.
Yeah.
Was there anything else actually? Because I know I rushed us through the playoffs at the end, but that was amazing. You and Justin going back and forth on Kevin Love. I love that. If I could have cheated and just like had like a point counterpoint debate for 2 hours, I actually would have put that as the show.
Yeah, I was tempted to actually make LeBron James my fuck that guy because it's like, just because you're the best player in basketball doesn't mean you have to start every play dribbling from like the top corner key. It's okay to run a play where you could be the guy off the ball. You'll get lots of lob dunks and stuff, right? And also because of all this hubbub about him and the last shot, like I'm just amazed at like how he's not getting like any grief from anybody. Like all of the media are like, oh yeah, David Blatt was such an idiot to do it that way, blah 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 blah. Now, leaving aside the question of whether Blatt was an idiot to draw up a play where LeBron was the inbounder, because first of all, let's remember LeBron is a really good passer, so it's not really the worst idea in the world to make him an inbounder. But like, I don't know if any of you have read Phil Jackson's, I think it was his first book, where he goes in this big thing in one chapter about the Eastern Conference semifinals, I think it was, in the year after Jordan left. And it was like game 4 in Madison Square Garden or something like that. And it was a tie game, and Phil Jackson drew up a play where Tony Kukoc would shoot the last shot instead of Pippen. And Pippen got like outraged. He was pissed off. So Phil Jackson said, oh, fine, sit your ass down. And he ran the last play without Pippen even on the floor. And Tony Kukoc hit the game winner. And Pippen was like, or Phil Jackson talked about how like that was just kind of one of those things that's like just bad karma, and teammates don't do that to each other where they like get outraged about whose job is what. That's not how teams should work. And I got to take David Blatt's side on this. Like, okay, you drew up a play. It should be LeBron James' job as a player to play it that way. And if it's wrong, then Blatt's going to get plenty of criticism from the media. You don't really need to go out there and say, no, I'm just going to audible that. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. Because, and let's remember, Scottie Pippen at the time, Michael Jordan had retired. Scottie Pippen was the star of that team when he did that, right? And yet, pretty much everybody agreed with Phil Jackson. Yeah, Scottie Pippen was being this unbelievable big baby about it. And yet, we're totally okay with the fact that LeBron James was this big fucking baby about the fact that he wasn't called on to take that last shot. Even though, and let's also put this in perspective, LeBron James had a fucking awful game, right? He had one of those more field goal attempts than points games. Let's not forget that.
It is always hilarious, by the way, when he had a game so bad. So, like, this can happen, right? You could come up to me with Steph Curry and say, Steph Curry went 13 for 28 from the field. Or not 28, maybe 13 for 25. And I'm like, Or actually, no, 13 for 28 works. You're like, he went 13 for 28 from the field. That sounds horrible. And then you go, oh, by the way, he made 10 threes and got to the line 5 times. So he got 40 points on 28 shots.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? LeBron James shot 10 for 30, which means even if every single one of those shots was a 3, he was still below average.
Yeah, he had a terrible game. Yeah, he hit the game runner, but he had a terrible game. So I think it's actually perfectly fucking ordinary. And if David Blatt had been any coach with like any kind of like pull or credibility to say, LeBron, man, it is not your night, but you're a really good passer, so you're going to pass the ball. We're going to try to get a shot. That would have been a perfectly acceptable thing to do. But LeBron fucking James, because he still lives in high school, this is pretty much LeBron's thing. He still thinks it's high school. He likes to surround himself with all his high school friends, and everything's like high school, right? He can't do that. He has to be the guy taking the shot. And yeah, he hit the shot, but it still was a petulant thing to be like, no, I'm going to ignore my coach. We're just going to do what I want instead. And I can understand if you think David Blatt was stupid, that's fine. That's a totally legitimate opinion. But to basically everybody is putting this big halo on LeBron and saying, yeah, he saved David Blatt from making a mistake by doing that. No. LeBron James was being a big fucking baby, and it just happened to turn out because he hit the game-winning shot. I mean, there's no two ways of putting this. And again, this has nothing to do with whether or not Blatt made the right decision there or not. But nobody seems to be criticizing LeBron James for the fact that he can't seem to he can't seem to ever bring himself to do what his coach wants unless what his coach wants is for LeBron James to be like the superstar. And that's just kind of
and as he's getting more as it's getting older and he has to rely more on his team, that has to be the case. By the way, it seems like you were just really on your fuck that guy game today. I think Justin being on the show helped that. By the way, there is a Warriors game coming up, so I don't want to keep Brian too much later.
Not coming up. It's in the second quarter right now.
Is it already? Oh, so Brian may have just left.
Yeah, we got to get out of here before Brian kills
Okay,
us.
so anyway, the one note I wanted to make, I didn't really hop into the comments, but I made an innocuous comment last show, and I'm going to defend it, where I basically talked about the halo effect, and I brought up Ben Roethlisberger and Kobe. And I'm sorry, people that try and defend Kobe because the woman was a liar. Just the facts were Kobe had an extramarital affair with a woman in Aspen. He had sex with her rough enough so that there was some of her blood on his clothes. She was a promiscuous person, fine, but the best you can do, like rape allegation aside, you throw that off the table. If that's the best scenario you put Kobe in, and you want to argue that Kobe comes out of that situation as a good person and that it wasn't forgiven because of him winning titles, I'm sorry, you're just wrong. It wasn't that the woman may have lied about some stuff. I can't speak to that. They settled out of court. It's a sealed record, but there is no way anybody can tell me with a straight face that they thought Kobe looked like the good guy coming out of that scenario. He lost all sponsors. He got them back because of the titles. Look at Tiger Woods as an example for what happens if you don't come back as a winner. So don't try and sell me on the fact that Kobe fans were somehow nuanced in that situation. And then I'm not even going to get into, I'll give a fair warning here. You guys got your one outlet to argue about false rape allegations, Kobe Bryant, whatever. There's a lot of room on the internet for that. I don't hate that we do have some nuanced viewers. You people brought up some nice thoughts. And sorry, Patrick, I didn't tease this at all, so that sucks. I realize it's absolutely horrible podcasting. Last week's show mentioned that happened in the comments. That's the one you get. I don't really want that discussion in the comments because it's far too deep for this blog. That's the one problem is we blog about sports. We come on once or twice a week to say Kevin Love's not being used right. I don't have the time in my life to moderate a forum for a subject that deep. So you guys got your one. I'm going to be a little heavier moderating going forward. If you put them on this show notes, if you're not talking about how awesome Justin is and how awesome his shows are, I'm just going to delete your comment because life's too short. That's what I got. That's what I got there, Patrick.
Go get your own blog. Get off my yard.
Exactly. No, exactly. I mean, we do this for fun. Brian had the most perfect zinger. Or I was like, we're doing this for free. And Brian's like, actually, you're not doing it for free. You pay to do this. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And the point is, we do this as a hobby for fun. And it's like, I don't want a job that I come home to. I'm like, well, I got to moderate this forum for 2 hours. It's like, no, I do this for fun. No, it's enjoyment. I get to use it as a soapbox. You get to use it as a soapbox. I want to keep it that way. If it turns into a job, we stop doing it. And I don't want that to be the case.
Yeah, I'm not even certain we need comments. I don't know. I mean...
It's so rough. If we didn't have, there's this
hard
threshold.
Yeah,
Here's the stressful. You guys are too good. Some of you commenters are too damn good.
Yeah,
and
that's
you
exactly
didn't
it. We have some
exist.
guys who give us great feedback, and they're totally worth it, and I love them. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should have a forum instead of a comment section. I'm not
But I don't
sure.
want to moderate. So I mean, I'm
Hey,
okay with this.
I gave you 10-1 that Brian's not actually producing at all, and he's sitting in front of his TV watching the game right now. So maybe we should just.
Yeah,
It's 61 to 44 currently, Patrick.
But
But I'm not watching on TV.
Memphis is up 61 to 44. Your Warriors are out of it.
The other way around, fortunately. Fortunately.
Okay, so
Let me guess. Stephen Curry is 6 for 10 from 3-point land or something like that.
I haven't been following that closely, but the real perfect zinger is I don't think LeBron was being a big baby by making that shot at the end of the game. Glenn Davis would have missed that 100% of the time. That's all I got.
Well, but would Kyrie Irving have missed it? Would J.R. Smith have missed it?
Pun. He was making a big baby pun. That's the second one you've missed, Patrick.
Oh, no.
All right, well, let's wrap up.
No.
Shout out, easy one, Justin Halpern, obviously, from all of us. Anybody else want? I don't even care. We had such a long fuck that guy, and we did positive and negative. I'm okay to.
You know what? I'm gonna give a shout out to poor Mr. Josh Whedon. I'm sorry you had to quit Twitter. I thought the fans were overly cruel to you. I give my shout out to you.
This sounds kind of mean on that, but that's like Dave Barry's an interesting person where I'll try and bug him to be on the podcast sometimes. He's like, I'm busy doing all this stuff. And it's like, on the one hand, I'm like, come on, blog. And on the other hand, I'm like, it is better for Dave Barry's career and probably the world at large if you look at some of his Time pieces, his Atlantic pieces that are more thought out than, the quick blog blurbs he used to put up when we started reading Wages of Wins.
Yeah.
I think Joss Whedon being off the Avengers and off Twitter, we might see something like this is the guy that made Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, which is one of the greatest things ever. If Joss Whedon is focused on creating right now, that could be a good thing. So
yeah, my dream is that Josh Whedon makes some really cool 13-episode Netflix series.
Oh man, if you're
That'd be
Netflix,
awesome.
just give him the money, whatever he wants to do. If he's like,
just let him do it, man.
Yeah, no constraint. All right, so yeah, I'll agree with that one. All right, so anyway, that's our show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you found this show not through the site, we are at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find our show on Stitcher and iTunes as the Boxscore Geek Show. We also have a live show that comes on every week, usually around Monday, that we also do the video version of. You can find that on channel Nerd Numbers. Subscribe and you'll find out, even when we throw zingers, like today we threw 2 different links at you on Twitter. Patrick is at NBA Geek. Brian is at Boxscore Brian, and I am at Nerd Numbers. And with that, we'll see you next week.